It's Common Sense Ohio. It's not really a 4th of July edition, but it's the 5th of July edition. Let's put it that way. So Brett is here. Norm is here. Steve was supposed to be. We think he's in a no cell phone zone or no Zoom zone. So
for sure,
hanging out with family. But that's okay. That's okay. So welcome to this edition, brought to you as always by Harper CPA Plus. If you like to have the freedom of knowing how your taxes are going to be put together, what you're going to pay to the government, Harper CPA Plus is the place, is the company. Those are the folks you want to contact for small business or personal too, because it's not always about the company stuff. We've talked about this before too. If you really want somebody to take care of your personal taxes a little bit better than the guy that spins the sign on the corner, Harper CPA Plus can do that as well too. But they're really in tune to the entrepreneur, the small business owner, because they get it, because they're small business as well too. So they know what the pains it takes to run a business, as well as try to stay ahead of paying what you need to pay to the government, and to find the things that you don't have to pay for too, to be smart about it.
Well, and it's timely to get a good accountant, especially because if the tax cuts which expire this year are not renewed, middle-class business persons will be paying approximately 20% more in taxes. So you need a CPA to help you find those deductions that you might be missing, or tax credits, or whatever planning you can do to avoid a potential 20% increase in tax rates. Yeah. That, again, if the Trump era tax cuts are not renewed by Congress and by President Biden, that's going to happen automatically. It's just going to sunset, and then tax rates will go up.
Yeah,
so
exactly. So
it's important.
It's best to plan. To plan. The contact information for Harper CPA Plus in the show notes. Just a click away, and you can set up a time and talk to them. What you got, Norm?
Well, I thought we, on July 4th +1, we could talk just a little bit about some interesting statistics about the Declaration of Independence. It was ratified, or approved, if you will, by the Continental Congress on July 4th, 1776. But all of those signatures at the bottom, they didn't actually get the last few signatures until August of 1776.
That's right. That's right.
So not everybody was in the room that signed that thing. The people who did sign it, the people who did approve of the document, they were all men. There 56 of them. The average age was 44 years old, but the majority were in their 20s and 30s. The youngest was 26 years old. The oldest was Ben Franklin, who at the time was 70. And there were only, I think, 7 signers of the Declaration who were older than 60 years old.
Yeah.
So in spite of that painting by John Trumbull, the famous painting that shows them all signing with silvery wigs on and all that, these were basically young people that signed this.
Yeah, and it's neat to put that in perspective in regards to how old some of those guys were, because in our mind we're always thinking that James Monroe was always 50 in our head, sort of thing. But yeah, Alexander Hamilton was 21, James Madison 25, Thomas Jefferson 33.
Yeah.
Writing something like that at 30. Yeah. Let's put ourselves back into when we're 33 years old.
Yeah.
Think about when you were 33.
Yeah.
I was dumb, young, and stupid at 33.
I think about that time, scholars will say that it was possible at about that time in history to have read every written book. Like one person could have read all of human literature at that point, which of course today, it's gone. Like you can't, I can't even do my own taxes, going back to Glenn Harper there. So even the Internal Revenue Code is so complicated. So at any rate,
it takes a lifetime to read. Exactly.
But Thomas Jefferson, being the author of the Declaration of Independence, it speaks for how educated he was. To be able to write that kind of document and use that kind of language.
Yeah.
the we're going to get into civil forfeiture, but like the guy with the biggest signature on the Declaration of Independence, John Hancock, at the time had his smuggling ship, which was called Liberty, had been civilly forfeited, had been seized by the British Navy. So the Brits had this customs duty that anything coming into the American colonies was supposed to, the customs house was supposed to assess and then charge a duty on that. And they had this policy up until the French and Indian War in America that they were very loose with that. They really didn't charge the duty. And after the French and Indian War, which Britain won over France, of course, and George Washington, had led British troops in that, American, loyalist British colonial troops in that war. So after that war, when Britain was essentially broke because of all the money they spent, that's when they really started enforcing the duties. Mm-hmm. And that's what really ticked off, like the Boston Tea Party and all that. That's what really ticked off the revolutionaries. And it's kind of funny to think about, like they had a 2% or something. Kind of, I mean, you think about it, right? Their tax was like 2%. And look at what we're paying for taxes like they started a revolution over 2% of a tax of 2%. And I mean, we have people now, of course, paying
double digits,
like 40% of their income tax. So at any rate, it's kind of interesting to what was meaningful at the time. And of course, by signing the Declaration of Independence, those men, like they were subject to being hanged.
Yeah.
Like it was
signing
an act of courage.
Yeah. Signing their life away, basically. Yeah.
Well, turning then, we might as well go to civil forfeiture. So,
sure.
So we had the Buckeye Institute attorney and staff person in, two guests last show, and the Buckeye Institute was filed one of those amicus briefs, which they have filed like 70 of them so far.
Talk about what an amicus brief is.
So an amicus brief.
Not that our audience doesn't really know, but I think it's good to put together why they do it and what it is.
Right, those Latin terms.
Yeah, sure.
So if you want to intervene in a case as a non-party to the case, if you have an opinion, like let's suppose the Supreme Court is going to decide a case about abortion, like they just did with the Dobbs case. I am sure that in the Dobbs case, they probably received maybe 100 amicus briefs, and what they are is simply people who are not part of the lawsuit or not part of the decision, except that they're citizens or they're institutes or think tanks or people who just have an opinion that they want to express to the Supreme Court. They mail in what's called a brief, and an amicus brief means a friend of the court. So you're basically saying, I'm a friend of the court, and as a friend, I'm giving you my analysis of this case for you to think about. And you can throw it in the garbage can or you can use it. So in this case involving civil forfeiture, it's a case coming out of Alabama. There were two people involved. Both of them had lent their vehicles. In one case, to a lady had lent her vehicle to a son, her son, and in the other case, another lady had lent her vehicle to a friend. And both the son and the friend got pulled over by the police in separate incidents. The son was charged with driving, intoxicated, and they found marijuana in the car. and then subject to Alabama's civil forfeiture laws, if property is involved in an incidental way to the commission of a crime, it could be a house, a car, a boat, an airplane, whatever, they can take that vehicle, they can take that property and seize it without any hearing at first. They can seize it and then schedule a hearing later. Well, in this case, the two ladies who had their cars taken from them, the other lady's friend, the guy was running drugs with her car. So both petitioners, both ladies lost their cars. They wanted the cars back. And so the state of Alabama had dragged this out for months. And their claim to the Supreme Court was there should have been a hearing before they took my car, where my attorney and I could go to court and argue that, hey, I'm an innocent party. All I did was lend this person a car. I had no control of what crimes they were going to commit once, they took the keys. So that was their position in going to the Supreme Court against how the system in Alabama works. And so the Buckeye Institute, who we had in here last week, filed an amicus brief in support of the ladies, basically saying, yeah, before you take somebody's property away, because that is part of the Constitution, right? We have due process rights before money or our personal freedom is, we have to go to jail. Like there's a trial, right? There's some kind of hearing before they do that. The Supreme Court said there is a long tradition going all the way back to John Hancock, who had his boat seized. There's a long tradition in British, which we got most of our laws from the British system, for the police to seize things up front. And then after they've already got your vehicle, then schedule a hearing, and it has to be a timely, whatever timely means. The Supreme Court didn't decide that, what timely means. But I think generally it is thought of within a month or two. They have to have some kind of hearing to say whether or not they're going to be able to keep your property. And then you can make an argument you're an innocent party. At any rate, they upheld the Alabama system. They said that there was no constitutional requirement to have a trial or a hearing ahead of time. And the Buckeye Institute filed this amicus brief, and both the majority and the minority opinions, the dissenting opinion, they both quoted the Buckeye amicus brief. And one of the, this is surprising to me, Brett, one of the most striking things, and I bet Steve would have a lot to say about this, by the way, as a defense attorney, as many as 80% of the civil forfeiture cases where they take your property do not result in a criminal conviction of any kind.
Wow.
80% of the time they take something, a car, a boat, an airplane, your house, whatever it is. There's no, at the end of the day, there's no conviction for that purported crime involving your property. And the majority and the minority both cited the Buckeye Institute's research on this, showing that many states, because they want to keep your property, right? That's a moneymaker. They showed that police are more interested in seizing the property because there's money for the department than they are in seizing drugs, which have no value to the police department. Like they sort of have bent what kind of enforcement they're doing in order to earn income for the sheriff's department or whatever. And both the majority and the minority had some problems with that, but yet they upheld their right to take your property without a hearing up front. So I found that fascinating, that both Neil Gorsuch and Justice Sotomayor both cited the same brief in support of upholding it and also dissenting on the same on the same case. So,
Right.
they actually included the Buckeye Institute in their opinions.
Wow. That's cool. That's
Which is really cool for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
know?
Yeah, you feel for those two cases mentioned just because what if it's the only vehicle that this woman has and that's how she
Right.
gets to work and
Right.
she was not involved in the crimes?
Yeah, the kid
There's
says, "Hey,
got to
Mom,
be some.
Mom, toss me the keys. I want to go down and visit Billy, my friend." Right? She doesn't know if he's going to go smoke dope in the car.
Right.
And, whatever.
Exactly.
It seems onerous to me, and I'm in this 80% where it doesn't even result in a conviction. The Buckeye Institute further goes into how Byzantine it is in many of these states to get your property back. I mean, you do have to hire an attorney.
Yeah.
I mean, just for starters, right?
Well, hopefully this sheds some light. Maybe some new legislation comes about it.
Yeah.
Let's put the timely piece back to it, as
Right.
well as mitigating circumstances
Right.
or some other due process
Right.
to get a vehicle back versus it's sitting there until,
Yeah.
if it's cleaned out and it's done,
Yeah.
you don't need it anymore and it's really not relevant to the case coming up, let the thing go.
Yeah,
But I get the cash incentive here, but
exactly.
But
right.
if it's against wow, that's
I mean,
interesting.
essentially, if you're poor in particular, how are you going to find an attorney at maybe $300 an hour, right?
Yeah.
To get your $1,000 or $5,000 car back
Yeah.
at $300 an hour, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like there's a lot of justice there.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like it's rife for abuse. The other thing that
Huge.
I'm troubled by, is homes.
Mhm.
So, like, you could be a landlord renting out a home, and somebody decides to, do a crack, or a meth lab, in your house, and then the police raid it, and they take the house, and then you've got to figure out a way to justify that you didn't know what was going on. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't,
Right.
and to get your real estate back. I mean, the potential for a police department to really lord over impoverished or people of lesser means, it's pretty obvious here.
Very much so. That's true. Thinking of it that way as well,
Yeah.
too. Wow.
And
yeah.
I think that's why the Buckeye Institute
Yeah.
was trying to support these ladies, because they are pro, property owner,
Mhm.
pro free marketers, pro liberty. That's the kind of think tank that they are.
Yeah.
And at any rate, I'm sure as a defense attorney, Steve has seen cars regularly seized.
Yeah.
In these kinds of incidents here in Ohio. So,
Right. Right.
at any rate,
Yeah. 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 Well, I can throw this is somewhat
please.
related to last week as well, too. I know the other, we had a two-parter last week, and one was dealing with school vouchers, school choice, and such like that. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And there was a story this past week that came up, and this is not really school choice, but it has some inklings to do with during the school day that an academy that's based here in Ohio, LifeWise Academy, it's a Hilliard-based nonprofit, plans to expand its off-site Bible instruction programs in Indiana following new legislation in that state requiring public schools to cooperate with such initiatives. The programs, funded by donations, aim to provide religious education during school hours to supplement family values. Critics argue these programs misuse public resources and promote a specific religion viewpoint, potentially excluding students of other faiths or beliefs. Despite controversies, supporters emphasize parental choice and the accessibility of religious education, especially for low-income families. So it is now incorporated in Ohio. I know specifically the Hilliard school systems. That's kind of where the academy is based. But I guess a couple of things that struck me about this, and just some quotes from the story that I saw. Number one, I don't have a problem with LifeWise academies of the world existing, but why does it have to happen during a school day? Why can't it happen after school? That would be my first question. I know that it can't conflict with classes such as math or reading, but rather lunch, recess, or electives, library, art, or gym, which, again, I don't particularly like. And children can attend it for up to 2 hours a week under Indiana law. Now, the quote, which I think, again, it's that during school and after school situations. Like it can easily be done after school. Why does it have to be during school? And another quote that came up too that is kind of bothersome, and we've talked about this before in regards to just how sports get into our lives on the weekend.
Can I ask a quick question?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Let me ask a quick question. So if I understand right, because I think I read the same story, but it's been several weeks ago.
Right.
They are not a full-time, like you don't switch from a public school.
No.
And they teach math and history and all. They teach the supplemental religious aspects.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the schools are obligated to bus them back and forth.
Okay.
So the parents are not getting out of work, get the kids from school, take it to the academy location and back. It's the school systems that are forced to run buses.
Okay. So
during that hour, 2 hours, whatever time period during the school day.
So we need to update about that bill that I brought into the show. And it's been a few weeks ago. And the bill required that if you were going to do religious programming during the school day, that the transportation had to be privately paid for.
Oh, okay.
So that was in the bill. So we need to find out if that stayed in the bill or if the bill even passed.
I'll look through that. I may have misstated that.
No.
I may have misstated that.
Or the bill didn't pass.
Right. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah,
but
exactly.
What it was, if I recall right, Brett, the legislation was such that all of the costs had to be borne they had to be privately paid. Both the tuition, if there was any to attend, and the transportation, and it had to be taught off campus.
Right.
Could not be on campus, and that was my understanding. But maybe that legislation didn't pass, or maybe it didn't pass yet, and so under current interpretation, maybe you're right,
and I'm wrong. I take that. That was my mistake.
Okay.
That LifeWise staff and volunteers either bus or drive students from school to the program or sites, or use spaces in your school. So again, the transportation's not to and from it. That piece wasn't. Yeah, it's supplemental in my mind. Being bothersome.
It's good to clear that.
Oh,
up.
for sure. No, thank you. It's that. During school day, I guess, when it comes down to it. So, and again, it's my alternative in my mind going, fine, this is great stuff, but why does it have to happen during school? And this quote from this parent in Indiana kind of solidifies in my mind. I won't say her name, but well, it's written in the story. But she said that she began sending her 10-year-old son to LifeWise in Garrett, Indiana last year. With baseball activities on Sunday, the family sometimes misses church and LifeWise fits the gaps. What a great way to solidify our faith. Okay.
Yeah.
To me, that's a priority problem.
Yeah. Right.
That's a priority problem. You're allowing sports to become number one on Sundays.
Sure.
But religion is more important than education.
Yeah.
Or
there's
you see a hole in school that, well, they can go during lunch or they can go during library or arts or whatever. It's like, wait a minute. You're choosing that because it interferes with baseball on Sunday.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
There is a lot of modern life now is happening on Sundays, which used to be reserved, for more, I don't know what, spiritual,
I mean, what are you teaching your kids? That baseball is, or whatever, the soccer, it can be whatever you want it to be that happens on Sunday. You're giving that priority and saying, no, Johnny, you can leave school and go to, and miss art, music class or, band or whatever. That's cool though. We're okay with that. But Sundays, so you can do that. We can go to baseball now and not go to church.
Well, a lot of people have observed that, the habit of families now, to gather around the TV, and basically the NFL is church now.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
The parents set the example. Yeah. Where they choose to do secular things. Yeah. Instead of.
And again, totally up to you.
Yeah.
But it's that. But why are you interrupting a school day enforcing legislation
Yeah, I don't.
to accommodate you because you're too busy on Sunday morning
What's the
with baseball.
Brett, there is a term of art, and I can't remember. Again, it was in that bill of what the downtime was referred to. So I guess it's like program hours that are optional. Like you
And
can,
now they listed it as that would include library, art, or gym.
yeah.
So at that time period, they couldn't do it during math or reading.
No.
The three
core,
R's,
the core curriculum.
Again, but some, and I included, look at gym and art as being kind of important.
Yeah, right.
Quite frankly.
Yeah, right.
You
For
know,
a well-rounded person.
I think so.
Yeah.
We learn, a lot of people learn from art and learn. We've talked about the importance of sports and gym and such like that.
See, for me, all this bussing around and breaking up the day and sending kids it's very distracting.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the solution is what we were discussing about ed choice. If you want your child to have a secular education, and in many cases, and I named several excellent public schools, and there are several in Ohio that are like Walnut Hills in Cincinnati. I think Mentor up in Cleveland, certainly Upper Arlington here. I mean, there are some first-rate, second to none. Like the parochial schools have no leg up on some of these public schools when it comes to academic excellence. So I'm not going down that road at all. I'm just saying, if parents want to have a religious element to their children's education, I think it's cleaner under ed choice to just go to a different school.
Yeah.
Rather
if that's what you want.
I would not want my kid's day broken up by, well, now we're going to get in a short bus and we're going to do an hour ride down to this academy and back in the middle of the day. No, I don't. That fractures their attention span. I just think it's clunky. Yeah. Even if they did it the best way possible and they walk around a fence and this LifeWise is right next door.
Sure.
I just think the kids need the same teachers. They need the same principal. They need continuity. And I think you pick one or the other.
Right.
In my opinion.
Yes. Yeah.
As a parent, I'm saying as a parent.
Right.
I'm not saying I'm not trying to tell people what their rights are under the law. I just think good parenting is you want your child to have a calm, focused day where they can really use their mind and absorb the material.
And give the teachers an opportunity for a calm, undisruptive day that they can teach the best that they can.
Otherwise,
we're already giving them so many disadvantages as it is.
They come
and we're
back,
adding this already.
They come back and they're all jacked up because they just had a little musical thing at the religious.
They were giving candy there or any kind of sugar, whatever, and they're jacked up. And just. I just don't understand why this cannot be after school.
Well, the two
I don't get it. I don't get it.
And clearly the two faculties have different ideas of what they're going to be doing. And so it's not even coordinated.
Right.
It's just you're going to go to this other institution. You're going to get whatever they do. And it could be excellent stuff.
Sure.
It could be fine.
Yeah.
But it may not fit in with the day that they're having back at the public school.
Right.
So I understand that people want to have that religious element. I think there's a different way to do it.
I think so too.
But I'm saying that as a parent.
Yeah.
I'm not saying.
I agree.
I'm not saying make it illegal.
No.
But I just think I think it's probably.
I'm sure LifeWise is doing a great job.
Let's just stipulate. Just for sake of argument, let's say they are. It still is a disruptive.
Right. It is, and just a.
It would be like sending them to the zoo. And then bringing them back into the classroom, all buzzed up from just having seen monkeys and giraffes.
Yes, exactly.
And it's like you can't get their attention again.
It's done. It's done. Right, exactly.
It's done, man.
I agree. Anyway, so I thought that it played a little bit from last week, and I know we've referenced last week's. It's a two-parter episode. It's really well worth listening to if you haven't got to listen to, because these gentlemen from Buckeye Institute, fantastic interviews.
Yeah, they really had some data.
Good stuff.
That it was good stuff.
Yep.
A Supreme Court thing that so we all know about this because we discussed it last week, and Steve has discussed it also. This case about Chevron, where for like 40, 50 years now, there was this deference called the Chevron deference, where courts were required under that Supreme Court decision to give deference to an administrative agency like OSHA or the EPA or Department of Labor, whatever, any department. They could come up with rules, and unless it was clearly outside of the mandate by Congress, in general, they were required to give deference to the rulemaking power of these agencies. And many people felt like that violated Article 1 of the Constitution, which defined what the roles of Congress are, that only Congress can make a law. And and to a lot of people over the years, when Congress delegated that power, they felt that that was an unconstitutional delegation from Congress to the executive branch, the White House, for Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter. That part doesn't matter. The idea is that the White House then, which controls the agencies, could make up laws by using its rulemaking power. And people thought, no, those kinds of decisions should be made in Congress. So anyway, the Supreme Court threw out the Chevron doctrine of deference and said now courts will decide whether or not an agency has gone beyond what Congress had intended in the first place. So that kind of brings the power back to Congress and back to the courts and away from the administrative agencies under the White House. So they just made that decision last week. And in the same week, and this is what blows my mind about the Supreme Court, it upsets me because there doesn't seem to be consistency in many cases with the Supreme Court. They decide this case, and then they take another case that has almost the same fact pattern, and they go a completely different direction. I mean, you know, and to me, well, that's why I never practiced law. So I have a law degree like Steve, but unlike Steve, I didn't sit for the bar, and I never practiced law because of stuff like I'm gonna talk about here. So the Supreme Court denied taking up a case. They denied the writ of certiorari to take up an Ohio case challenging the deference to the to the Occupational Safety and Health OSHA administration. And this Ohio case, the name of the company is Advanced, I think, Manufacturing or something like that. But at any rate, they were turned down by the Supreme Court. They did not take up the case, and they wanted to appeal to the Supreme Court along the very same lines as the Loper Bright and Relentless case, which knocked down Chevron. And their argument was OSHA can make up rules about how you run your company, everything from, how much chlorine you put in the pool if you're a swimming pool maintenance company, how many flushes a toilet can have, or how many gallons per flush, all of this detailed stuff, what kind of light bulbs and all this stuff. And clearly Congress never voted on what kind of light bulbs or what kind of chlorine levels or none of these how big a ladder how wide, all these things that OSHA has decided. And they wanted to bring that to the Supreme Court, just like those fishermen did in the Relentless and Loper Bright case, which threw out the Chevron doctrine. And the fisherman case, as you remember, was the administration agency said you have to not only have an inspector on your boat, you have to pay for that inspector. which is a federal, food fishery inspector on your boat, you have to not only have him there, but you have to pay his salary. Well, they knocked that down. And so it's frustrating, I'm sure, to this Ohio company. And Clarence Thomas, who wrote the dissent in this denial of the writ. So the Supreme Court didn't decide against the Ohio company. They just decided not to hear the case, which is, very frustrating. So we'll never know until maybe another case comes up whether or not OSHA has exceeded, what it's legally allowed to do. But, that's kind of like how we talked about the Supreme Court knocked down the New York Department of Insurance, which was saying don't do business with the NRA because we disagree with the NRA's speech, with their political positions. And the Supreme Court voted 9-0, unanimous, that the state of New York could not use government action to tell insurance companies not to do business with the NRA. And then on that same day, they decided to turn down a case involving the administration, the current administration, going out to Silicon Valley and instructing Google, Facebook, Twitter to not permit speech about COVID or about other subjects. And that contradiction is what frustrates me. It's like how can you decide that case that way and then not decide?
You don't see the similarities here.
And they have usually in the opinion they explain some very fine distinction. And in the case of Murtha, which is a case involving the federal government going to social media and deplatforming people and squelching, it would be like if they take us off of Facebook. Our show's on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We're on Rumble. Mm-hmm. We're on a few of these. And it would be like the administration saying, hey, those guys in Ohio, they're talking about COVID. They're talking about other issues. We don't want them talking about that, so deplatform them. How that was not decided, how that was turned down by the Supreme Court was they said the people involved did not, and these were states of Louisiana and I think Missouri. They said those two states did not have standing to bring that case. And you just, you furrow your eyebrow a little bit and go, but they represent millions of people that never got to hear that speech because it was suppressed at the behest of the FBI and the White House, and that's on the record. Like that's not disputable. And so
it was lacking damages, basically.
Lacking standing, because I think in the view of the Supreme Court, the infringed parties were the social media companies themselves. Okay. They were the ones being told not to say things or not to allow things to be on their platform.
Not the plaintiffs.
So it seems to me that the Supreme Court would have decided the case in favor of the social media companies had they brought the lawsuit.
Had social media come up with it.
But instead it was the states and it was individual internet surfers, including people who were deplatformed.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like some of those doctors that wanted to discuss the origins of COVID, wanted to discuss the efficacy of the vaxes, their opinions were taken off the air. And that's pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, and I mean, it pretty much it states how we can't figure this out ourselves.
Yeah.
On any topic.
Yeah.
Let's go with any. Maybe it's not. Maybe let's take COVID off the table.
Yeah.
And it could be the use of regenerative batteries or just batteries in automobiles. Okay. So let's say I want to talk bad about that.
Sure.
in regards to how they mine lithium and how they do this, how they do that.
Right. Yeah.
Can a company shut us down for stopping that wave? Because there's a lot of money being put in that
big
business.
social is also a business,
right?
And
because that and that may actually be a good analogy, because that wave of battery operated cars is looking to change how we travel in a big way,
right?
And again, it's not life or death. I can't compare it that way, but it is changing the model of how cars are made.
Oh, yeah.
The aftermarket, like we've talked about.
Well,
in
and
regards to
environmental impact.
Environmental impact.
Of mining this lithium.
Correct.
People wonder.
Even though Elon says, well, lithium's everywhere. Lithium's everywhere. It's like, well, okay, if it is, you certainly aren't getting it from everywhere. You're getting it from Chinese mines.
Right.
So
and Elon, in the case of Twitter, or now X, has liberated that social media platform pretty much. Mm-hmm. Most of the people that had been deplatformed, like Alex Jones, are back on. Mm-hmm. So he has kind of turned on the First Amendment on Twitter.
Well, he realizes crazy is what crazy is.
Yeah.
I mean, bottom line, crazy will show itself off.
And he's also brought back, some of the more unfortunate parts of Twitter, like pornography, which I'm told Twitter now, you can't get on there without seeing pornography. Mm. That it's throughout that platform. So and that's unfortunate. Yeah. But again, that is kind of the ugly side of free speech.
It is.
So you mentioned talking about EVs. And as we've talked about on the show here many times, the ACLU, which, and Steve had a mentor who was involved in this litigation, a Jewish attorney who worked for the ACLU, defending the rights, get this, people, defending the rights of Nazis and Ku Klux Klansmen to say the filthy, ugly, racist shit that they want to say. And you had Jewish lawyers working for the ACLU standing up and representing those groups. And that just shows you the necessity to protect all speech. Mm-hmm. Because even the worst kind, even the most ugly kind, because if you suppress it, what you end up having, like they suppressed Hitler in Germany. They for many years he was not permitted to give public speeches, and the Nazi newspaper was shoved underground, and that created interest. Like that creates, in a sick way, people seek out the suppressed, and they're intrigued by what they're not allowed to have, mm-hmm. and it adds glamour and desire to something that you are forbidden to see or to have.
Well, take an example when CDs, music, albums and that sort of thing started getting the labeling back in the 80s.
Yeah, Tipper Gore.
Right. Thought this, and again, it was all a valiant effort. They wanted to make sure that
her intentions were good.
They were. And they, wanted to give parents the opportunity to know that when their kids bought an album, or a 45 at that time, or a cassette tape, or whatever, all those antiquated mediums that we don't really use anymore.
It was labeled.
It was labeled as, okay, there is some offensive stuff on here, just so you know. Yeah. Well, that in droves, when you saw that label, it's like, oh, right.
So that's what I want.
That's what I want.
It backfired.
It backfired hugely, and it's still on there. And now we don't even pay attention to it because our eyes are so accustomed to it. So to that point, you start to shove things underground. I mean, I've always made the point that I don't see the KKK doing this much anymore. Those having their day on the courthouse lawn, the state house lawn, and I always in my mind thought, if we let them be there, okay, they got their permits and such, but nobody show up then.
No.
Just don't pay them any attention. No. Well, we have to go out and protest, and we have to get all the TV crews and stuff. That's what they want.
Exactly.
Just leave them. Don't even give them an audience.
Sure. Right.
They won't come back.
Right.
I don't understand this. Just get into a shouting match where you're not going to win. It's all for show.
Well, their idiocy, if it's allowed to be out in the open, becomes self-apparent.
Right.
Like
Right.
when they say, people are this or people are that, and you can see the opposite is true.
Right.
You're like, well,
Right.
you guys are just, you're dumb. You're
Yeah.
like and you let people, as you say, form their own conclusions. That's the American way. You can think whatever you want, and I know we have this culture, and I say it here all the time. I love everybody, but we have this culture where we think that hate, people talk about how hate is a bad attribute, and it is. But the thing is, you can't legislate hate away. That needs to be taught. Good, solid family values get passed down to your kids, and you teach them that everybody has value and that they're not to hate anybody.
Right.
And that's the way that you defeat hate. You can't you can't pass a law. This is what drives me crazy. You pass a law about hate speech, and then you have hate speech enforcement agents out there looking for something that somebody says that in their judgment is hateful, when it may not be.
Right. It's in the eyes of the beholder. Like
so if
the pornography, it's in the eyes of the beholder. It's like,
right.
Well, I don't know what by definition it is, but when I see it, I know it. I know
right.
that it is, kind of thing. Yeah.
So when I say, for example, there was Justice Sotomayor wrote a dissent in the presidential immunity case, which just was decided, where any presidential action in the official capacity of being president is 100% immune from post-presidential prosecution. That was his decision. If the president did something in his private capacity, okay, then that he has a presumption, just a presumption that he is still immune, that can be overcome by proof that he did that only to benefit himself or herself personally. Okay, that was the decision. So Sotomayor, speaking of hate, I mean, this is just, to me, it shows that she is a little unhinged, and I respect many of her other decisions. But in her dissent, she said, well, what if the president ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political opponent, right? And I'm like, oh my God, Justice Sotomayor. Several things. First of all, the people elect the president. And after much vetting and debates and whatever, we get to know the candidates, and the people select the president. And hopefully there's the first hurdle, that the people chose the president, and hopefully the people chose wisely. Number two, members of the military, I don't know how she could not know this. Members of the military take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. It is illegal, right, for the U.S. military to be used against domestic civilians. So
it's probably a bad example. I guess she probably could have used, okay, so a sitting president hires a gun for hire.
An assassin who's not in the military.
Not in the military to do the job.
Right.
Okay, now that's a legitimate example.
That's a legitimate example.
And potentially could happen. I mean, it could.
Right.
Sure.
And so what are the protections if a president goes off the rail? Well, you can impeach the president. Okay? Number one, you can impeach the president. Number two, as the Supreme Court just decided, and she dissented from the opinion, that there's only a presumption that the acts are official. Mm-hmm. It is not a blanket immunity against all actions taken by a sitting president. So if the sitting president were to hire somebody to do something illegal and it's outside of his official duties, he is absolutely liable for that criminally and civilly. Sure. Okay? So her example of like using the organs of government to go after your political enemies Well, there's some indication that that's happening right now under the Biden administration, which we've seen in, these Trump prosecutions. For example, the Alvin Bragg New York case, where Trump is said to be 34 times a felon, and yet the judge in the case did not require the jury to specify what felony they were finding him guilty of. They did not have to agree on what the second charge was that made the financial notes about, paying somebody, to be quiet. What the second charge was, they did not have to specify. It was not on the jury ballot. And that goes against the unanimity part of due process in a criminal case. Unanimity means that the entire jury, all 12 or all 6, have to agree on specifically what the felony being charged is and what the felony being convicted on is. And so that case is clearly using the judiciary as a political weapon. And that would be a better example for Sotomayor to use is, when a president delegates his attorney general or state prosecutors to go after his political enemies in order to interfere with an election, that's a pretty serious thing. But she's blind to that and invents this crazy hypothetical that no member of the SEAL Team 6 would ever carry out. They would not carry it. They would not. They're not. If you told SEAL Team 6 to assassinate Senator so-and-so, they would not do it.
No.
They would not do it.
No.
And I don't know how she could think that could ever happen. And let's suppose in the worst possible dictatorship scenario it did happen, the country elected a bad man or woman to be president, and then Congress has to impeach them and throw them out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the solution.
Yeah.
And that's built into the Constitution.
Yeah, which in that scenario would be pretty obvious. And
obvious.
And it would get done pretty quickly.
And we get done pretty quickly.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
I mean, look at the impeachment the House did, the second one on Trump. They did that in 1 week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They impeached him in 1 week.
Right.
And the Senate didn't convict him.
Right.
But like you say, it can happen fast.
Sure.
Like, hey, wait a minute. You just killed that senator?
Yeah.
We're impeaching
We're done.
you.
It's done.
We're done.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah, exactly.
And so why would a president do that with it? Because you're not going to get away with it.
Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, exactly. I saw this pop up. I don't know why I'm on this education kick, but I love this.
No, that's a good subject.
But California high schoolers will soon need to take financial literacy class to graduate.
Wow.
A semester-long course would need to be offered by the 27-28 school year and a requirement to graduate starting with a 30-31 class. Well, from what I've researched, they're a little bit behind because under Ohio law, students entering ninth grade on or before July 1 of 2022 must earn 1/2 credit of financial literacy as a graduation requirement. So good going, Ohio.
Yeah.
Love it. So yeah, Ohio.
The old-fashioned word for that was like home ec. Right?
Kinda, but this is going to be down and dirty understanding how to checking accounts and all this kind of and what so investments
important.
are. Yeah, totally.
So important. And we never had. I mean, at my
I don't
school,
recall it.
We never had any of that.
But I think. When we went to school, again, not that we went to school, walked 5 miles in snow. It wasn't as. I think savings wasn't as complicated. I mean, in our lifetime, the 401k developed.
Right.
CDs developed.
Right.
I mean, it was basically you had checking, savings, and a home loan, and the market.
You could invest.
And I'm sure our parents would have, and never, I know my mom and dad never invested in the market.
Yeah.
It was just that you didn't know how to do it, number one, and it was just not what you did.
And you had to pay a stockbroker a pretty decent fee.
Right.
To buy and sell like shares of Procter & Gamble.
Yeah, now it's a totally different world. I mean, both our kids, I know our
mutual
daughter.
Funds.
Our daughter, our daughter, is starting a new job, and she in 90 days in, she'll be opting in for their 401k plan, and she wants to sit down and try to figure this out. Our son kind of the same way in regards to even though he's part-time job at Christ Hospital down in Cincinnati, but at 90 he can go into a retirement, that sort of
I
thing.
think
So it's that it's a force in the hand, but it's one of those you do have to know what you're walking into and understand. Even $50 a month makes a difference in the long run for 40 years of work. I mean, starting out, just do something.
Well,
and this class will help, I think.
Brett, any kind of practicality that's injected into the school system curriculum is a great idea.
Yeah.
To
understand
practical
this,
things.
it demystifies it, if nothing else.
Right.
To understand,
right.
These are the options to you, no matter what income level, no matter what job you do.
Absolutely.
Take advantage of them.
How to function in a society.
Right.
It's more than just math and reading. You need to know certain things as a citizen in order to function, and I think that's a step forward.
Oh, for sure. So I didn't know Ohio had that in play. I just did quick research. Like, all right, good for us.
Yeah, right.
Good for us. Yeah,
very good.
Yeah. What do you want to end on?
So I think I think this is a pretty meaty subject, and we'll see how this plays out.
Sure.
But as you know, Trump has been doing, I think, what Nixon called the Southern strategy, where you go very conservative during the primary and win that with your most
your base.
The people who are the most committed intellectually to the tenets of the political party, to their platform. And once you win the nomination, then you start verging towards the middle. And Trump has been doing that, I think. There have been several stories recently that after the Dobbs decision on abortion, Trump has been softening ever more so his position on abortion to the point where now he is saying it's just a state issue. It's completely in the hands of the state. He pledged during the debate with Biden that he will not sign any federal legislation which restricts abortion at the federal level. That, for example, like having a third trimester ban, for example, which is effectively what Roe, the Supreme Court, said. Basically, you could not do an abortion in the third trimester. But Trump has said no. It'll be up to the states. And as you know, Ohio just passed a constitutional amendment. In Ohio, we are one of the most lax states, one of the most open states now to get an abortion in Ohio. In theory, if one doctor, you don't need two doctors, if one doctor says that you are medically, it is necessary to have an abortion, even in the third trimester, you can have one in Ohio. And so what Trump has been trying to do, they say, behind the scenes, his people are taking out of the Republican platform what has been there since 1980 under Reagan. The Republican platform has had what they call a human rights amendment, which is a right to life amendment that they wanted to, it's a dream, never going to happen. But they, in the platform, to have a constitutional amendment about the right to life and that, no abortions. And also to limit abortion to only the health of the mother, emergency, rape and incest. And Trump is taking that out, they say. He is taking out all of the right to life language in the Republican platform, so that at the convention coming up, when the platform is solidified, it will no longer have all of that anti-Roe right to life language in the Republican platform. And he's ticking off, as you can imagine, a huge segment, because not all conservatives are pro-life. No, not at all.
No,
but many conservatives are. In particular, the Southern churches are, and Baptist, Catholic Church, ostensibly. Although you can get a variety of opinions from Catholics, as you can from
any religion.
From
you're right.
any religion.
Oh, you bet. Yeah.
But this people are saying Trump is picking an unnecessary fight with his own base here. And so that will be very interesting to monitor, Brett.
Yeah.
Because clearly what Trump is trying to do is pivot and get those suburban women to vote for him. And he is trying to tone down, even though he's the guy who appointed the justices that overturned Roe, he is saying, I only did that so it goes to the states and it's no longer a federal decision. It's a state decision. So there's some big wheels turning here. And it'll be interesting to see if Trump loses more of the evangelical vote. Does he pick up enough of the suburban women to offset the evangelicals who may?
And then you roll the dice. So who do they vote for then? Or they just don't vote?
Or they don't vote. Which they're saying many in the minority community are upset with Biden for letting in too many illegals that are taking their jobs and their benefits and their housing in places like New York City.
Sure.
So they're going to stay home is the thinking, or maybe vote a little bit for Trump.
That'll be interesting when it's all said and done, the numbers.
Yes. This is something to watch.
And who clicked what if that president, or a ton of write-ins.
So in Milwaukee,
we'll do a Steve Palmer write-in again, that sort of thing.
So in Milwaukee, when the Republican platform comes out, we'll see who won and who lost.
Yeah, and keeping an eye on it on both parties.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah, there's going to be some possibly, there's that talk that they're going to keep working on Biden and try to get him to step away. And the only way they could do that is then by electing somebody at the Democratic convention.
Right, exactly.
Because right now, those electors, those delegates are pledged to vote for Biden.
But they can change their mind, though. Right?
Not the ones that are not the ones who are by law.
Okay, by law. Okay,
gotcha. They have to vote for Biden.
The
only way they're released is if he releases them.
Okay.
Under the DNC rules.
Okay. I
think they call them super delegates.
That's what I keep hearing this super delegate.
I'm not an expert.
I don't know much about it.
My understanding
isn't it interesting though? This scenario educates us on how the stuff works, which I think is great.
I think eventually what has to happen for Biden, for them to pick a different candidate, whether it's Kamala, whether it's
is she on the plate though? I haven't heard her being discussed.
No, I think people in the Democratic Party would like Gavin Newsom to run.
That's what I thought.
I think
I keep hearing that name.
Well, because he's nationally known.
Right.
I'm not so sure that people know Gretchen Whitmer that much. They know Kamala, but she's not popular even with Democrats.
Yeah.
Michelle Obama is popular, but she shows no interest. I don't think she wants that lifestyle.
Sure.
So
yeah, exactly. No, that's interesting. Yeah, exactly.
We'll see. So
okay.
But my understanding is under the rules of the Democratic Party rules governing their convention and who they're voting for, he has to make that decision.
They're not from what this is outside looking in.
Yeah,
it's got to be. They got to convince the people around him.
Exactly.
Convince him.
Right.
His inner circle's got to come.
And so far,
and they're gonna have to get into Jill's head. They're gonna have to get into Hunter's head and kind of go, dude, your dad's your husband. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, that's going to do it for this week. Thanks to Harper CPA Plus. I'll get that out as a sponsor of this and all Common Sense Ohio shows. If you like what we did today, if you didn't like what we did today, have any opinions on what we have, shoot us an email. We'd love to hear back from you because we get comments occasionally on social media, but we'd love to hear from you. We've got an email address in the show notes. Give us a shout and we'll shout back out because we know we're not 100% correct, but we're not 100% wrong either, I don't think. But that's going to be it until next week. We'll see you then.